And, a lot of it's happened organically from having some great people here that brought their friends, brought people they know, helped recruit other people. And as we sit right now, we're over 100 people. You mentioned we have 2 offices in New Jersey. We actually just this week hired a few folks. We're opening up an office in Phoenix as well.
Here we go.
Have you ever wondered how successful architecture, engineering, and construction companies scale their business?
Or have you ever wanted guidance on how to get more growth, wealth, and freedom from your AEC company?
Well, then you're in luck. Hi, I'm Will Foret.
And I'm Justin Neagle, and we're your podcast hosts.
We interview successful AEC business leaders to learn how they use people, process, and technology to scale their businesses.
So sit back and get ready to learn from the industry's best. This is Building Scale.
Hey listeners, it's Will here. Our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy. If you've ever listened to our show, then you know that the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology. So if you suspect technology is your weak link, then book a call with us to see where we can help maximize your company's IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
Today's guest is Bill Mandara, who is the CEO and co-owner of Mancini Duffy. Bill is an industry veteran with 25 plus years of experience and has worked on notable projects like the TSX Broadway project, Peloton, Pier 17, Arlo Nomad Hotel, Brooklyn Army Terminal, and Boqueria. He's transformed Mancini from a traditional architecture firm to a tech-driven design studio and focuses on new building design and adaptive reuse of existing buildings. This includes leading the complex TSX Broadway project, which is a $2.5 billion with a B, 550,000 square feet project in Times Square, including lifting the century-old Palace Theater approximately 30 feet. Mancini Duffy is a national firm, design firm with a 100-plus-year-old history and a tech-forward approach, specializing in architecture, planning, and interior design. They're headquartered in New York City with the regional offices in Millbourne and Red Bank, New Jersey. And with all that said, Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I love New York. I've only been there once, and I immediately said, I live in Chicago. What do I need to go to New York for? It's the same shit. But no, I disagree. I walked out of Penn Station, and I was like, holy shit. It was immediately different for me, so I'm jealous that you get to experience that much more often than I do, certainly. But yeah, that's my New York story.
There you go. It might smell a little different. Yeah. It is the same shit, but it smells a little different in New York.
Grid system it's and like a little bit of planning. A little bit of planning,
for sure.
50 years into the future, right?
Yeah. Right on.
No, totally. So yeah, I said all these cool things about you, but tell us the real story. How'd you get in construction? How'd you get connected and become the leader at Mancini Duffy with Christian?
Yeah, sure. So came from a long line of people in the construction industry. My great-grandfather came over here in a boat from Sicily, with no nickels in his pocket, was a laborer. Grandfather was a mason contractor. My dad was a general contractor. So it's, kind of the next logical approach. I would literally, as a kid, go to work with my dad and my grandfather, and they would tell me, this is what we do. You should be the other one who tells us what to do. And it just kind of happened like that. So it wasn't, I have 2 sons, as I was mentioning when we were talking offline before, and both of them kind of had to go through a little bit of a journey to figure out what they want to do. I didn't, and it was good and bad. It was good because I'd watched some of my friends struggle with what they were going to do, and I was like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. So it was kind of easy. I didn't have to think about that. I could focus on other things. So that's how I got into going to architectural school. After college, I worked at a small firm for about 10 or 12 years. From there, I left for another opportunity to basically run an office with a friend of mine who would be my partner for a larger company. That went well until, if you've seen the movie The Big Short, you know what happened. So that company did a lot of work for financial clients, and yeah, that did not go so well. fast forward a few years, Mancini Duffy actually bought that firm and acquired it. I came along with it. They said, hey, okay, great. You got this little cool office in Jersey. We're going to grow the crap out of it, and we're going to have fun, and it's going to be awesome, and this is a great future for you. And the first 5 months we did well. We made a little modest profit. The 1 month, I think we lost about $150, and they said, bye-bye. Killed the office.
Cutthroat, man.
Yeah,
Jeez.
it was bad. We still had like 3 years left on the lease, too, and they just would rather pay the lease with nobody in there. But at any rate, they killed that, offered us jobs in the city, which I was not too jazzed about. You seem to have a much better affinity than I did at the time for New York City.
Again,
I
5
grew up
days
here.
compared to
No,
years
it's fine.
in the city,
It's
probably
fine.
very different.
It's for me, it was more of the headache of going in and out. I went to college in the city in 1990, which was it was a bit of a scene. But at the same point, I had my kids were in grammar school. I had a pretty nice setup where I had this office that was 5 minutes from my house. I could roll out of bed, take a shower, be in the office a half hour later. I could stay in the office till 7:30 at night, get all my stuff done, and then still be at home in time to have dinner with my family. I was able to scooch out and go to my kids' little concerts and teacher conferences and all that stuff, and endeavor to be a pretty good dad. And then all that was kind of over. I'd have to go to the city. So I wasn't too thrilled about that. So I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder when I came here. In fairness to them, to the previous regime at Mancini Duffy, they let me work from home because most of my work was in New Jersey, and they were, pretty fair. They're like, why are you going to come here just to go to meetings here or go that? So I did that, and I still got to spend some time with my kids, which was great.
Just to be clear, I think back then it wasn't called work from home. I think it was called telecommuting. I think was the terminology.
I don't even know what it was called. For me, it was just like I was ahead of my time. I had a little office with a computer and a decent internet connection in my house. But at any rate, it wasn't so bad, and it was good because there was a lot of nonsense I didn't like at Mancini when I got there. It was just a very corporate, buttoned-up firm. And, having worked in a small office for the beginning of my career, having had my own little office where me and somebody else ran it, I was able to do what I wanted, able to come and go as I pleased. I curse a lot, unfortunately.
That's unfortunately for me.
trying to do better.
Yeah, man after our own heart, for sure.
But, it was a bit of a culture shock, but I was able to kind of go into the shallow end and wade my way over there. And as time went on, and I kind of loosened up my attitude, my crappy attitude about going into the city, I saw the firm changing. I saw, when they acquired my previous firm, it was about a total of 150 people. And it was a bit of a ham-handed acquisition, quite frankly, because my old boss didn't really tell everybody what was really going on. He told the people to whom he sold the firm one thing and told everybody else who was coming along a different thing. So everybody's kind of like, hey, okay, great. We're all going to get raises and free pizza and BMWs. And when that didn't happen, there was a lot of people left. So I would say after about 3 years into it, it went from about 50 people in the firm where I was to about 10 of us. And during that time, I had also brought some people over from my first job with me to start that office. And I felt a little responsible I didn't want to just kind of flat leave them. I had a few opportunities to get out and do different things, but, there's a level of Catholic guilt of, bringing people along and then being like, all right, peace out, guys. I'm going to do something else. Hope everything works out okay. So during the course of that, Ralph Mancini, who had previously transitioned his ownership to the firm, was growing a little bit concerned about the next chapter after that and preserving his legacy of the firm. And he had brought Christian Giordano to the firm. I had met Christian once, literally a week before he started here. I didn't even know who he was. A mutual friend of us brought us out, and, we went out and had too much steak and too much to drink and had a great time. And I'm like, wow, this guy's great. I'd like to work with him someday. And then he shows up there, and we hit it off pretty quickly. And it was pretty good. And so he came to me he kind of spilled the beans about why he was really here. Told me he would need some help and if I'd be interested in going, in helping them out with that. And I thought about it for about 2 seconds, said, yep. Talked to my wife, who's always like, you do what you want to do. I don't care. And we started this ownership transition, and it was interesting. It was difficult. It was extremely educational for me. I had, despite the fact that my dad had his own business for my whole life, I didn't really have a good idea of how businesses work. I had, the peripheral knowledge you get from my dad coming home and stressing out over payroll or getting paid and getting work and all that stuff. But, when you go to architecture school, they don't teach you real things you need to know. They give you 1 semester of professional practice where they tell you, like, don't copy other people's drawings and put them on your title block. You're like, okay, great, but how do I read a balance sheet? Right, that's good to know, but it'd also be good to know these things. So I got to learn a lot about that. We brought in some facilitators, whether they were executive coaches, or there's another gentleman named Ted who was I believe he was the CFO of Mancini back like 10, 15 years prior. He was semi-retired. We brought him in. He showed us a lot. So we really kind of invested in ourselves in learning how to run a business. And, like I said, more than I learned in that professional practice class and 1 semester of economics, that I think I got a C-. From there, we were able to buy the firm and transition. Listen, I tell my son all the time, my younger son's got to go to grad school. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, you don't have the luxury I had of, I just had to get the diploma. Nobody goes back and looks at my grades. You have to get good grades because you have to go to grad school.
I had there was a saying where I went to IIT, C's and D's get degrees.
There you go. Nobody, it's like when it's like in golf and they say they don't have pictures on scorecards as long as you got them. But, so from there, it was, I don't want to bore you with too many of the details, but yeah, we over the course of time, we were able to buy out the previous ownership, who was very gracious about it. They let us step in and ostensibly start running the firm years before we actually came to an accord on that. And I think we officially took over in 2017, and here we are. Now we're, when we took over, there was some work to be done. There was, we needed there was some really, really good people here, but we needed more of them, and we needed to get more people on board with doing things differently, being a different firm. So we've built that up over the years, and, a lot of it's happened organically from having some great people here that brought their friends, brought people they know, helped recruit other people. And as we sit right now, we're over 100 people. You mentioned we have 2 offices in New Jersey. We actually just this week hired a few folks. We're opening up an office in Phoenix as well.
Here we go.
Maybe I'll go out. Maybe we'll go out and play around the golf at TPC or something like that. But so
you definitely have to do company outings out here.
I'm in. Get those United miles.
That's right.
But yeah, so that's where we are now, and it's kind of hopefully the Reader's Digest, not just vomiting words into this microphone. But yeah, that's kind of how I got from here to there in 6 to 8 minutes.
Bill, let me ask, when you spent the whole 2 seconds with regards to Christian and jumping on board, and running the thing, it's a lot of time to spend, right, on such a big decision. Have you ever had any issues, right? Because we've had a bunch of people on our podcast talk about partnerships and where they run into issues. Some partnerships work great, others don't work out so well, and then there's everything in between. How does it work between you and Christian?
Well, that's a good point. And I think, there's a few reasons why I didn't really hesitate. First one is I've learned over the years I have a little bit more tolerance for risk than I may have thought. And I think a lot of that comes from my dad and growing up in that area where, 1 year maybe, hey, Billy's getting a Corvette for graduation, to the next year, like, you might have to take a student loan out, right? So I kind of grew up in that, and I'm used to it. On the partner level, listen, I've worked not at a lot of places, but I've seen a lot of partner relationships, and I've seen some pretty darn toxic ones that have, where there's different factions and people are sometimes, I've seen it where one partner will literally just let another one make a bad decision to prove a point that he or she's right. So really what made that so easy is the fact that Christian and I, we get along very, very well. I think we have a healthy respect for each other, what we do. We're different people. We do very different things. Christian is way more on the design end, cares a lot more about how, not that I don't care about things look, but he cares a lot more about that and has much better sensitivities to that, where I have always been on the technical end. I know how to put things together pretty darn well. So there's never been any kind of competitiveness between us, because we do different things that complement each other. And honestly, we like each other. He's a good friend. He's seen my kids grow up. I've seen his kids grow up, and it's been a good friendship. So there's respect there as well. We're not trying to, that's the foundation of everything. Because again, I've seen some awful, awful partnerships, and I've seen some really vindictive business decisions happen that affect a lot of people just out of, people's own spite.
So obviously you're not duplicates of each other. You complement
not
each
even
other.
Close. Yep.
Yeah. So you're almost on opposite ends of the spectrum. Would it be fair to say that it's almost like yin and yang?
It is. Although I would say yes, we're very different, especially if you look at the two of us, we're very different, but we were both brought up with very similar values. Christian's dad was self-employed, just like mine. I think, it's kind of corny, and Christian will probably make fun of me if he hears this, but we both grew up in Italian-American families. There's certain values you have there. And I think it's just as different as people can be. If you have the same foundation, same values, things that are important to you, family, all that stuff, it works easily. And we also had very similar visions for what we wanted a firm to be. I've worked in some pretty shitty environments in my career, where I've seen a lot of, unnecessary angst, unnecessary tension, unnecessary yelling. It's not what I wanted to have. You can go two different ways. Some people will be like, well, I had to go through this, so do you. I don't agree with that. And neither did he. So we had very similar visions for what we wanted to see moving forward.
So awesome that you found a partner, whether it's by chance or not, right? I'm sure there's a little bit of luck. I'm sure
everything happens for a reason. That's what my mom would say.
How does it, in the very few instances where there is resistance, right? Mm-hmm. Where you don't agree on something, how do you deal with each other? How do you figure it out? And to that matter, how do you deal with frustration or anger? And how does Christian deal with it?
Listen, the first one, it's really simple. We have a conversation. If I think that we should, burn the desks in the middle of the office down, he's going to be like, I don't think that's a good idea, and this is why, and vice versa. I think because we have respect for each other, it's just a conversation. There's nothing else. What happens so many times, and I've seen it, and, I'm fortunate enough to be married for almost 26 years right now as well. And, you don't stay with the same person that long by adding unnecessary things to, I don't know if you want to call it conflicts or disagreements, but, if you focus on what's the thing you're disagreeing on, you can just have a conversation. It's not personal. So I think we're very good at that. And we really don't disagree all of that often. Sometimes it's silly things, but sometimes maybe there's a thing I want to do or a person I want to hire, and he might say, what, I get it, but this is why I don't think it's a good idea. And I'll be like, okay, cool, I trust your judgment, and vice versa. And I always say that if we're going to do something, and I don't mean something silly like, ordering pizza, but if we're going to make a major move, we both have to agree to it. And if one of us doesn't agree to it, we have to trust our gut and say no, because there's been times where we've done things in the past and we've both been like, I don't know, but all right, let's try it. And 100% of the time it hasn't worked out. So I always say if one of us has a weird feeling about it, just let's just not do it. We'll move on to the next thing. I love
the explanation there, and I love hearing about the partnership, that how you kind of work through things. Super cool. I'm sure we in the audience could learn a thing or two just by being a fly on the wall and listening to your conversations.
Well, listen, I've also learned from my own mistakes. I would say in the past, again, I've made some odd decisions, and I've taken almost everything in my life personally that I shouldn't have taken personally. But, I think you get to a certain point. And when you trust somebody too, it's a matter of if you trust somebody. If I know that you're not, if I know you're literally saying, Bill, I think that shirt looks a little bizarre on you. You're not saying it because you're trying to make me feel bad. You're just trying to give an honest criticism. Go back to the shirt store and try a different one, and it's cool.
We can all go back to the shirt store every once in a while. Finding trusting people, right? Finding trusting people, not just a partner, but people that work for the firm, right? So, take us through the kind of growth of that. So, 2017, you officially take over, even though you were kind of doing the job before that. What did the firm look like then, and then what did the growth based on people growth since then?
I would say we're probably around 50 to 60 people there. Right. And listen, 2019 was, we kicked ass, and 2020 was shaping up to be an amazing year for us. It's funny. I had renovated my house, which I had planning on doing for years, but I finally did it in January of 2020. We started the construction, which there's a whole other story there about how literally during COVID, I had like 20 people in my office with air compressors and doing work in my house with the roof ripped up and my whole family. I was like, no big deal. We'll take like little weekend trips to here and there, and it'll be great. We don't have to worry. We don't have to rent the house. It'll be fine. Don't sweat it. Yeah. But at any rate, we really had a good year. We were probably up around 80 to 90 people. I always joke around because I got some really nice appliances in my kitchen because my wife and I are in the store. I'm like, it's going to be a great year. Screw it. Let's get the good stuff. Obviously, it didn't turn out so well. So like everybody else, we contracted, unfortunately, a bit during COVID.
Sure.
And, I always say like 2020 was obviously a bizarre year. It wasn't great. And 21 into 22, I think was when we really, really started feeling the effects of it, because everybody kind of like treaded water and did things. And when you got to 21, 22, that's where things started getting a little weird. But something happened very early in 22. It all started coming together and everything started working better. Internally as well as externally, we started getting more work. And since then, thank God, we've just been on a tear. I mean, like I said, we're up above 100 people now. We have a couple other things in the works to be announced later. Like I said, we have Phoenix going. So we have some major projects we've won. And thank God, it doesn't appear to be stopping. We're very fortunate in that respect. Now, listen, a lot of what helped spur that is, to your point about trust, is other people here. In no way would I ever sit here and take credit for any of this, honestly, because it's there's so many different facets involved, everything from the technology we have that we use to the processes we have, to the designs we have, to the designs we've done, to the projects we've gotten, to the people we have, to the projects we've gotten from doing other projects. All of that stuff is all kind of kind of rolled down the road like a big ball of yarn, and hopefully we can continue it.
So I hear a lot of growth, which is inherent when it comes to scaling. It becomes very apparent. I want to ask a little bit, right now in terms of expansion, was your firm, when it was first acquired, was that the only sort of acquired firm in terms of M&A, or has there been other M&A, and is M&A part of the future of Mancini?
Sure. So Mancini, my understanding, so now keep in mind, I only got there in 2011, and I always joked around in our old office, I came with the furniture. So I believe they had acquired a couple firms and everything, but by the time listen, by the time it was how many times can you say the word time? But when our time rolled around, that was all kind of done. So, but we have done some acquisitions over the years. One of the first things we did was we acquired a small firm in New Jersey that allowed us to open up our Millburn office, and that has turned out to be, now we have about 14 people there. That's one of our most profitable offices. In 2022, we acquired a firm called Gertler & Wente. In the 20s of people, they did a lot of healthcare work, multifamily work, and other work, and that was great for us. It worked out actually great for the gentleman who founded the firm because they were looking to still work for a while, but wanted to make sure that, again, their legacy was preserved, their people had a place and all that. So that worked out great for us because we were able to add on this healthcare sector that we to our book of business, which is was a completely new thing for us. I've dabbled in healthcare. I've done doctor's offices, but we certainly didn't have that credibility, and now we do. So that's been great for us. We were able to bolster our multifamily practice. Again, we've done a fair amount of it, but now we have a real solid, credible book of business that we've done, and we do that. There's different ways you can grow too. I mean, we brought on somebody 2 years ago who's an expert in life sciences. He had been at the same firm for quite some time, and it was just kind of time to move on. And he came on, and he's been growing that sector as well. And then there's just kind of the organic growth. We have a gentleman here who actually runs a Millburn office who started doing some aviation work. I think we had an opportunity to do like a lounge or something, and he's turned that into a huge sector for us. I mean, we're doing aviation work all across the country and potentially even in other countries as well now. That happened organically because he came to us and said, I like doing this work. I want to pursue it. And we said, okay, whatever resources we need. We did a school about 6-7 years ago, and the woman who worked on that took that again from one to another one to another one. And now we have an education group. So there's all different ways it grows. And it's important that you do it all different ways as well, because sometimes some support the other, right?
Yeah. And allowing your people to be able to grow and take and run with an idea, I'd say that's fairly rare. How are you able to do that?
You have to have the right people. Yes, you have to be able to trust people, and you have to give them the space to grow, but it has to be the right people. And, we're fortunate here that we've had a lot of people that have been here for a very long time, and we've, just like they've seen us grow. Some people, when they started here, I was just some, either running a bunch of projects in the studio or something, and they've seen my growth, and I've seen their growth along with it. So there's a level of trust you have that they're invested in here, and they're going to do the right thing. And if there's an issue, they're going to raise their hand and say help. So that it's really just about having the right people that you can trust. And, I've made some mistakes with some people over the years, but I think if I was playing baseball, I'd have a pretty good record.
Okay. I like that. So, all right. We talked a little bit about people. We talked a little bit about process, technology. This is something I'm a little excited about because when we talked in the pre-interview, I went, you guys really have something going on. And I think you should kind of spread the word about it. So tell us, and why don't you start with where it all started, right?
Yep.
And how you approached it first. Without giving too much away, I'll let you tell the story.
Okay, so I sat in a room. I did magic mushrooms with Aaron Rodgers, and it all came to me. That's not what happened. So there's a gentleman here, Mike Kipfer, who, years and years ago, when he was just a young buck, came to us he had this idea. He wanted to start trying out and experimenting with different technologies. So Christian had an office in our old spot, and he said, "Can I have your office?" And Christian, being Christian, said, "Yeah, sure, take it." And a week later, there's VR glasses, there's 3D printers, there's people doing kind of weird stuff in there when an old school guy like me might be like, "Hey, shouldn't they be working?" But indeed they were working. And it all kind of came together for me when we were doing this project. And I was trying to convey to the owner that what he wanted to do in the lobby of this building was going to create a volume of a space that was not going to feel good. And in his mind, it was more grand to take out 2 floors above and have this big, tall space. And I kept saying, you're going to feel like you're in a box of Raisin Bran. And when they showed me, they kind of came to, hey, look what we can do. And I was like, oh, cool. Can you take this and put it in there? And they're like, I think we can. And they did. And they gave me these, it was like it was like those first VR things. It was like a cardboard box with a phone in it. And we were standing there at the end of the meeting. I went to the gentleman. I said, can you do me a favor? Put this on. And he was like, Mandara, what are you doing? I'm like, just humor me. Put these on, and I want you to feel what this is. And he looked on it, and he looked up, and he goes, wow, yeah, this sucks. I don't want to do this. And for me, I was like, wow. I had spent numerous meetings trying as diplomatically as I could to say that I respect your idea, but I don't think it's going to be all that great. And in literally 8 seconds, it was boom, done. So I was like, okay, I get it. I'm in. And then from there, we started doing things like we had another project where we had a lobby, where it was another building renovation. We had a lobby, and it was in Long Island City. And they came to the project manager who was working on it, and me, I was the principal on it, and said, hey, what if we try to print part of the wall, like 3D print part of the wall? And I said, what do you have in mind? And they came up with a design. They presented it to the client, and the client says, great. And it was this brick wall, and they were 3D printing these different bricks with different shapes that abstracted out to something. I'm like, okay, good. How's this going to work, though? And they were like, we don't know. So I was like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We went and we ordered, it was those thin, a bunch of the samples of thin bricks, a bunch of the system in which it interlocks. And I said, all right, come over to my house on Saturday. I'll get some beers and some power tools and some lumber, and let's try and do it. And we literally sat out in my garage and driveway, and we built one, and it didn't work. We built another one. And after a couple of weeks, we had this sample that probably weighed like 250 pounds. But it was roughly figured it out. And we brought it into the office somehow, and we showed the client. They're like, yeah, that's great. And ultimately, they refined that way more than this kind of weird mock-up we had in my driveway. But, everything from that, and I think it's also kind of the camaraderie about it too, is, everybody was like, all right, we're gonna go to Bill's house and watch his wife look out the window wondering what the hell is going on. And then from there, they were like, can we bring on people who can write code and write software? Well, sure. And, it was at the point where we knew, we made this investment in the firm, but it's not like we're trying to get in and get all our money and go buy a Lamborghini and leave. We know this is a long-term investment. So sure, we spent some money on some different things. And then from there, they started developing, our own software, which is patented now. It's called the Tool Belt. And what that is that's an interactive tool that allows you to walk through the design of the space or the building. Some of the early versions was literally like we mocked up. They were putting tape on the floor in the cafeteria or where you'd eat lunch in our old office and hooking it up to a TV. And they brought the owner of Pokeria, who you mentioned before, in there, and he brought his chef in there to see how the kitchen felt in VR. And he was like, oh, move this here, move this here. And it was just a series of these things being like, wow, that's super useful. And because it's our own software that's developed in-house, they're able to make edits to it. So, that has evolved tremendously over the years to the point where now it's so evolved that we're doing a vehicle maintenance facility for one of our clients. And when we were actually sitting there trying to win the job, we gave them the spiel about our software and showed them the demos, and they said, this is great, but can we actually drive the trucks through there? And I'm like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll get you to drive. So we got the job. I came back and I'm like, guys, so I need you to figure out how to drive a truck. Here's my Amex card. Go buy a steering wheel and some stuff. And you know what? To their credit, they figured it out, and it was great. We had numerous sessions with the client, with the end users, and when everybody first got over the goofiness of somebody sitting with goggles and pretending to drive a truck through a thing, it actually was super useful because we were able to see that the way we had envisioned laying out some of the signage and some of the directions of the path of travel of the traffic wasn't really that great. So rather than, having it all built and then going somewhere and somebody gets in the truck and is like, wow, you guys kind of screwed the pooch on this one, we were able to pivot very quickly, literally in the meeting, change a couple things around, and then boom, and it's done. And this is all before we even went into construction documentation. So, that's just one small example of it. But the development of that software, it's changed everything for us. It's changed our entire process. When I was 10, 15 years ago, you would do your project, you would get your drawing, your 2D drawings, you'd get your plans, your elevations, you'd get a rendering that was super important. The rendering kicked ass, right? Maybe you'd send it off to China to get done or something like that, and go back and forth in Adobe and explain why people need to scale, all this other stuff, and maybe you'd fib a little bit in the rendering because you want it to look good, right? Maybe maybe you move the sun to an improbable angle or something like that, so it's shown and then you'd give this package, and then you'd make sure it was spell checked, you had the right date and all that other stuff, and then you'd present the package, and you're like, I like this, I like that, but I don't like this, I don't like that, and you'd go away for 2 weeks. You'd send a rendering back to China and maybe start it back over again, and you do everything and spell check it, and then you come back and you do that over and over until you got to something where everybody likes. And then inevitably 2 years goes by and it's done, and the guy looks at the rendering, or the woman looks at the rendering and is like, hey, it doesn't quite look like that. As opposed to now, where we just bring everybody right into the process. We bring them, whether it's in our lab, in VR. We have an AR version of it now where we can go right on site and people can walk on and you can switch on and say, this is what it looks like. This is how it feels. And this is what it looks like with the structure in it. This is what it looks like with the sprinkler lines in it. And, hell, there's a strobe light right over there where it shouldn't be. Maybe we should move that now instead of when it's built and somebody comes in there. So there's so many things that have been a game changer for us. And I think the thing that sets us apart from some of our competitors who use it, because I can't sit here and puff my chest out and be like, we're the only ones. We're not the only ones using technology. Everybody uses technology. Everybody uses VR. Everybody's starting to use AR to a certain extent. But to us, it's literally everybody here has embraced it, and it's in everything we do. It's how we work. And it's just another tool, right? Because sometimes people will sit here and say, well, what about the design of it? Is this a trick? It's not a trick. It's just a different tool to do it. Because ultimately the design is what's important about how things look. But it's just another tool for us. And it's not the money shot, so to speak, right? It's just the process. And that is something I'm really proud of. I will tell you again, if I've had zero to do in putting it together other than saying yes and handing over my credit card and allowing and saying yes on a few strategic hires. But I'm very grateful for all the work everybody's put into it.
That's actually a good point. You're not the one that is the technical resource, right? Like
not at all.
I'm going to give you the dollars, but I'm not inherently going to be able to sit and code with you or even think through all of the problems that are going to come from technical builds, right? Like just like building a building, architecturing a building, right? There's inherent things that you don't know until you're in it, and then you're in it, and then you're like, oh man, this is different. How did you get through the we call it the innovation phase, right? Innovation, to Will's point, is a lot of failure, right? Like that is innovation because you have to fail to figure out how something works great. How did you kind of work through that as somebody that's not in it because it's not your expertise, as well as keep the team motivated to keep pushing on?
I think there's a level of trust, right? And there's also a level of everything we've done as it came out was so cutting edge sounds corny, but like, so kind of like as it came out, it's happening. So there's a way of explaining to clients, and again, it's about not putting on airs, right? We're not going to sit here and pretend. We've never, when we've brought people in, said this is going to be 1,000% perfect and nothing's going to go wrong ever. Because honestly, that's not how it is, right? You're going to come in. This is something we just worked on. There might be a few glitches. We'll get through it. We'll get through it together, right? And most clients are fine with that, because at the end of the day, they know that you know what you're doing, and they're getting to experience a different method of project delivery. And the way, and again, it's evolved, and everything that's, if we've, here's a perfect example. Early on, we did it, and we had a building, and we walked through, and it was on the 5th floor, and it was really cool. They went and they took drones, and they mapped out everything that was outside. But the client kept looking out the window at the drone thing, a virtual, not the real window, and kept like walking out of the building, like boo, and then falling to his death, and it would just kill the whole thing. You'd have to restart it and start over again. Like, okay, client, please don't walk out the window. Pay attention to what this conference room looks like. And the next person would put it on and be like, oh, cool, that's outside. Woo, walk out. And so be there after it. And what's good about it being our own build is that, they were able to go in there and okay, we're going to now set up whatever sequence of numbers and letters has to go in there so that you can't walk outside and, plummet to your virtual death and screw the whole thing up. So that was, that's one example of learning by it. And we tell everybody this is something that is evolving, and it's constantly evolving. Like I mentioned, the thing with the vehicle thing, that's just one evolution that came because of it. So it's different, during COVID, they had started coming up with what they call a 2-player version, right? And I said, that seems kind of neat. We were working on a project at the time when the client was overseas. I'm like, that's pretty cool. All of a sudden, that's pretty cool, to like, holy crap, this is absolutely necessary, because we want to be able to present these things. And we did, and we presented them in a manner where it was almost like playing Call of Duty, where you have your little thing walking around and you can see, there's Justin walking over there in that part of it. And and it's like Madden, right? They'll see the little guys walking around, and you can go in there and people can scribble notes on there. They can measure, they can do all different things. So again, it's constantly evolving, and I think the fact that it is constantly evolving makes it easier to understand that everything isn't always going to be perfect. Now, I will say we haven't really had any like disastrous gaffes, because it's always been, anytime we've had a meeting or tried something new, these guys have tried it out so many times. It's been fine. I mean, I think the worst one was when they first started getting in. I went in there and I thought it was funny to throw the table out the door or something like that. But I think I somehow screwed up the thing by doing that. But otherwise, it's vetted pretty well. But again, nothing in life is perfect, and that's no exception.
So you got to crack a few eggs to get an omelet, right?
There you go. That's my old boss used to say.
When I think about technology, whether a cost or investment, right? And different companies think about this differently. You obviously think about technology as an investment. Mm-hmm. But there's a little bit of the unknown that's happening here. Was the visionary part really, did it come from Mike, or was there a need? And what it's evolved to today, you couldn't have necessarily imagined back then when you first started this, right?
Correct. I definitely couldn't.
So there's a little bit of, we'll call it faith or trust in that this is going somewhere, and there will be a return on it somehow, right? So how do you evaluate something that's as, so out there, right? And you're just putting dollars into it and not necessarily knowing if you're going to get the dollars back.
So, again, I don't know that there's a real metric I could put forth in it, but for me personally, seeing the reaction of clients, seeing the reaction when we tell potential clients about this, seeing the reaction when we tell folks like you out there, that's what it is. It's something that separates us apart. Look, we compete with some of the largest firms in the world. You know all their names. Sometimes we compete with a 5-person firm, and it's hard sometimes to stand out amongst those. So it's definitely a differentiator. It's not our only differentiator. We do great design. We have great people. We have solid technical drawings, all that good stuff. But it's a differentiator. And for me personally, when I saw that early on, that it's something that makes us different, you're not going to walk into architectural firm XYZ's office and have that same experience. It's a no-brainer. I don't necessarily need to see a spreadsheet that says what the actual return on the investment is, because there's an intangible there that to me is invaluable. Now, if somebody came and said we need to spend $2 million on an AI computer that's going to turn us all into human batteries, I'd probably be like, no. And if it does, hopefully our robot overlords are kind to me. But there's a certain intangible that you can't really put a value on. But I will say that it really has set us apart over the years, especially earlier on. And now as it continues to evolve, because that's the challenge, right? Everybody catches up. When we first did it, we called the room the design lab, and we had some cool signage made up and had a party and website, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you're like flipping through and you're like, oh, look at that. That company has a design lab. Oh, so does that one. Look at that. So you have to be constantly, updating and improving things.
So, okay. Technology makes, tell me if you agree with this statement, that technology makes, when used appropriately, technology makes all businesses look a little closer to each other. And in terms of function, right? Mm-hmm. So, you're in the business of architecture and design. So, where do you draw the line between? Because you're now in the software development business, which is very different from architecture. So, where do you draw the line between we're a design firm to we are a SaaS company or something like that, right? You can't be in every business.
Yeah, of course.
So how do you make that distinction? How do you draw that line?
The technology has to be in service of what we're doing, which is bringing great design, putting great design out there, improving the built environment, all of those things that might sound a bit cliche, but as long as the technology is in service of what we're doing, what we're here to do as architects and designers, could we figure out a design, a piece of software to have a robot make the best Neapolitan pizza? Maybe, but that's not what we do. It's a silly example, but it's not what we do. It's not in service of what we're doing. So to me, again, it's about the great design. It's about the great drawings. It's about the great client experience. It's about all of those things, and the technology is simply just a tool to get us there. No, it's no different to me than when I graduated college. I was like AutoCAD guy, right? And I still am. I guarantee I could beat the shit out of anybody in AutoCAD if they just tried to use it, because I would get so much work done so quickly. It was insane. It was, and all the older guys, some of which, one guy I'm still friends with, they'd be like, you can't design on that thing. You need paper. And I'd be like, it's just another tool. And then, as Revit came into play, I went to the obligatory, when I first came to Mancini, they were like, you got to take a Revit class. And I sat in some house and they showed you, here, to design taught you how to draw a house somewhere, which I think I just wrote silly things on it to make fun of my coworker. But it became apparent to me that I was like, wow, this is the next thing. And I guess I'm going to be the guy now yelling at everybody because you should do things by hand drawing and not by that. So there's always something else. There's always some different level of technology out there that's going to be different. And at the end of the day, it's a tool. It's the same thing goes for AI, right? It's a tool, and until it starts harvesting our organs, it's a tool.
How do you see it affecting you? Do you see? I have my own personal opinions on AI, but do you see AI being useful to you and your firm in, let's say, the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? When do you see it truly being useful for you?
I think it can be already in the idea of doing quick iterations of something that you've thought of. I've mentioned before I'm a musician as well, and I think there's a whole controversy because Motley Crue just came out with a song or something, and they're saying that it was mostly AI generated, and they use. To me, I hate that because it's the same thing, right? When it becomes a replacement for the human part of it, it's just not the same, and it's cheating. And I think you can tell the difference, right? There's a certain, not to be too philosophical, but there's a certain human spirit that is in all things creative, whether that's designing space or buildings, whether it's creating meals, whether it's creating music, creating art. There's a certain human spirit that's in there. And sure, you can type in the right combination of words to get it, or even writing. I personally detest ChatGPT. I have a lot of friends that are like, oh, just type the thing and it types it up for you. And my mom was a teacher, so it drives me insane. It's also writing is one of the few things I'm kind of good at, so it really pisses me off. But again, but at the same point, I have no problem after I've written something to type the little button with the ABC to spell check it, right? And that's some form of that. It's a tool. So I think that it's a fine line, and we're really at a weird inflection point as a society with where do we draw the line on this, and where is it, what's okay and what's not okay? Because I just keep going back to the music thing because that's what I'm pretty passionate about. But like, you can tell when something is manufactured for the masses because, the right, that this clicks with this focus group. So it's going to be this chord progression or this topic for a song. Right. And it's like that with everything else. Right. It's why mass produced fast food sucks. But your local steakhouse, is great with the people who have hopefully had it for years, and they have that same oven that they've been cooking steaks in for 40 years. That's why that's great. And, Olive Garden sucks, right? It's like the same thing because all of that stuff is tested out for the masses. What is the best thing that people are going to like? What is the one flavor going to like? And it's broken down, and it kind of sucks. And I think it's like that with everything, including architecture.
Well, there are riches and niches, even though technically it's not called niches, but I'm going to call it niches anyways. Justin,
yeah, I agree. The watered down, yeah, for sure. The watered down version of anything creative is never, it's watered down. It's literally what it is. So when you talk about if it's food in Olive Garden compared to a little, tiny mom and pop shop out of New York, like inherently it loses the love and the beauty that it is because it's watered down for the masses, right? Architecture, same thing, right? If it's just like you're building a box, it's got some rooms in it and move along, like it doesn't, sure, does it function as a place where people could go? I suppose, but it's different. It loses that soul, as to your point.
Right. And that's the danger. Yeah, so, and that's the thing I see with AI. That's the danger with it, right?
For sure. One thought that I wanted to make sure the listeners had. So Spot, Migration, and Mancini have actually one big thing in common. We both have podcasts, obviously Building Scale, which you're on right now, but you guys have a podcast as well, The Anti-Architect. Tell us a little bit about that. Just give a little blurb on that and what you guys are doing with that.
Yeah, so that's my partner Christian's podcast. He had an idea to do one. He saw saw kind of a lack, not a need, but, a void out there in the industry for people actually talking honestly about what we do. Another reason Chris and I get along is we both kind of will say what's on our mind sometimes, whether you like it or not. Me a little more so, to my own detriment sometimes. But his thing is to have an honest conversation and not just sit here and talk about how great we are and how great everything, but talk about the not so great things. He has guests on all the time, and he always asks them what annoys them the most about architects, which I think is great. And I think it's good too. You get some good responses. So yeah, he started as an idea. I said, what if we did this? And it's actually become great. He's got some really killer numbers now on Spotify and Apple. He just celebrated a milestone, and I'm proud of him. He's doing a great job with it. He puts a lot of work into it.
Well,
love that.
I love the question. We may have to adopt a version of that question.
You have to talk to him and get his permission first. I don't know. I'm just the messenger.
I won't.
I don't think you can copyright a question, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't think that works that way.
But we do have our own question that we like asking on the show. So it's time for our last question. If you were to go back 20 years, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself?
Buy a shit ton of Apple stock. Number one. Look, I have made, I've made some mistakes in my life and in my career, none of which have really hurt me that badly. But I've had a lot of luck. I really had things break a certain way for me in moments that is just kind of almost inexplicable. I mentioned before, I was completely bummed out. I put all my chips in the middle of the table in this firm, and it got bought out by Mancini, and turned out that was the greatest thing that could have happened to me career-wise. So I would not tell myself a damn thing about business, just because I do really, really believe everything happens for a reason. And everything that's happened to me in my professional life that I've seen initially either as an obstacle or something bad has always led to something great, or something better, or something that's brought me to where I currently am. And I'm sure that trend will continue for as long as I'm fortunate enough to be doing this. So I wouldn't tell myself a damn thing other than to maybe just stop buying Jets tickets, because it's never going to happen.
Maybe Gary Vee, when he buys the team, can turn it around.
Hopefully. Anybody, please.
Yeah, as Bears fans, we know your pain, so it's totally relatable. This has been awesome. You have been absolutely wonderful. If somebody want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably just shoot me an email at wmandara@manciniduffy.com. It's all on our website. That's the easiest way. Otherwise, my social medias can get a little salty sometimes, so I would I'd go the work route.
All right, sounds good. We'll make sure that I put the website and everything in the show notes there, so no issue. And anything else you'd like to tell the people before we say our goodbyes? No,
listen, I had a great time talking with you guys. We it was a fun conversation. So keep listening, keep up what you're doing, and lots of people listening to Building Scale, hopefully.
Oh, awesome.
100%. Love
and live it up now before AI turns us all into human batteries.
That's a Matrix reference for those of you that live under a rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, spoiler alert, Will. Jesus, what is that, 30 years ago? Nonetheless, this has been a blast. Listeners, I hope you had just as good time as us. Please check out Bill and everything that he's doing out in New York and across the country as well. And until next time, adios.
Adios.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, Book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
Keep building scale.
scale.